A good amount of Alabama fans are absolutely freaking out about Kalen DeBoer after Bama dropped their second game before November started. That's the last time since 2007 since that happened, which might as well be 1907, and they rightfully should be upset. Alabama's been one of the teams that's a gold standard of college football for some time now, but for the fans screaming they want Saban back, pump the brakes a little bit because I don't even think Nick Saban could replicate what Nick Saban did for a long stretch the way the game is now. That isn't to say DeBoer needs to be let off the hook. He doesn't. But let's not forget Saban's team struggled with on-the-field discipline and penalties down the stretch as well. But as we've said before, when things were going wrong when Nick Saban was there, he had built up enough equity with the Alabama fan base where the heat wasn't nearly as hot because they knew he could fix it. And most of the time, he did in a big way. But that equity is not there with Kalen DeBoer. He not only hasn't proven he can improve this ship so far, he also hasn't proven that he can fix it, which leaves Alabama fans in a state of unease and uncertainty, which is new for them and, to be honest with you, is probably pretty jarring. Now, as far as his style, DeBoer has to do it his way, which you can tell is vastly different than Nick Saban's. They're shooting jump shots in the middle of plays. But if Bama was winning and playing well, the celebrations and loose grip he seems to have with discipline on the team would be a point of positivity for Alabama fans. But since he isn't winning at the normal rate, it's become the focal point of frustration. The season is still young, and if DeBoer turns it around, it will go back to status quo with sunshine and rainbows and candy canes. But until then, the dark cloud will remain, and the questions and qualms will only get louder. But if you look around the sport, it seems the days of monopolizing it with one team are over. And at this point in our game, I don't even think Nick Saban could do what Nick Saban did. We bring in former Michigan quarterback David Cohn, my brother, former Western State Colorado wide receiver Blaine Crain. And David, I got a two-parter for you opening here. One, what do you think is the appropriate level of freakout for Alabama fans right now? Where we stand, state of the race, whatever you want to call it. And two, do you agree with me that the days of being able to dominate from a personnel standpoint and a discipline standpoint, the way that Nick Saban did, are over because you just don't have as much control anymore?
Yeah, I think you're right about that. But I see this as an incredible opportunity for Kalen DeBoer and his staff. Every coach is going to be celebrated when things are going well, when you're winning every single football game. And to your point, some of the things that are going wrong right now are not necessarily new for Alabama. The Crimson Tide were one of the most penalized teams in the conference the last couple years of Nick Saban. But the thing was, he was always able to right the ship during these weeks, week 7, 8, 9, 10. I mean, keep in mind, Alabama was not elite on either side of the football last year, and they're one play away from making the national championship. That's the difference. That's the Saban difference. Kalen DeBoer, you have that opportunity right now. 2 losses already. Okay, you get to host Missouri this week in a top 25 matchup. Great. Go out and beat them. There's a reason the spread's 13.5, right? You get to go on the road and play LSU. Beat them. They're at the top of the conference right now. Go win that football game. You get to go on the road and play Oklahoma. You get a chance to beat your biggest rival in the sport at home in the Iron Bowl. You went out, you're going to play in the college football playoff, and this is happening right now in real time as you're the beneficiary of a playoff that's tripled in size. And you're not necessarily even out of the conference championship race, even though that one's going to be a little bit tougher. But go with your back against the wall right now. 2 losses, win out, and you'll make the college football playoff. And then from there, let's see what happens.
Which would include a win at LSU. I mean, you could really get the confidence back. And by no means am I saying this season's over, you should throw it away. But Blaine, to my original point, with Nick Saban, very rarely was Alabama out-personnelled. Very rarely were they out-coached. But I've never seen an Alabama team that's more vulnerable to being out-personnelled and out-coached as a combination in a game. But Nick Saban would always have the right medicine. He would have the right antidote to be able to, when it came down to crunch time in these big games, Alabama, and not every time because nobody's perfect, but they would make the plays more than they haven't. They did against Georgia, which is what I think gave Alabama fans so much hope that, hey, our closing ability hasn't changed. It's just a new name on the mail. But now after the Vanderbilt game, you're not able to come back and close it out at the end. And then the Tennessee game, you're not able to come back and close it out at the end. Why should Alabama fans have faith in Kalen DeBoer?
I don't know. I mean, you can have faith in what his record was before he got here. I mean, his resume is one of the best, but sooner or later, the losses and who they're against is what worries me. Obviously, Vanderbilt's not the same team we're used to seeing, but Vanderbilt is still Vanderbilt, right? And you almost lost to a South Carolina team that had, on the offensive side, has not looked great. Their defense is good. And this week, you lose to a Tennessee team from the last 3 games, hadn't scored a point in the first half. So, and the way you're losing, you brought up Nick Saban, even in these games where they're penalized or the close games, they would always find a way. They'd always do what they needed to do to get the win, and that's culture, and that's something Nick Saban has been able to build up over time. But Kalen DeBoer, you knew when you took this job that you didn't have that type of time. You don't have chances to build up equity. You took an absolute castle of something beautiful that's been on top of college football for years and years, and you knew at the first sign of something going bad, everything was going to point to you. And now that's happened twice. So if it happens again, if you lose 3 games right now, we can all sit here and agree that you're probably out of the playoffs.
Yeah,
you're probably out of the playoffs.
9-3, you're out.
The real trouble comes if you lose another one. 1, who's going to stay around and keep playing hard for you? And 2, then what do the fans do? Once you get out of the playoff realm is when the real conversation of trouble starts.
And Alabama's not used to being in that world.
No, they're not. Alabama's not used to being in this world.
Yeah, and before the season, and you can go back and look, and we talked about this at nauseum because it's the truth. Everybody said, how do you think Kalen DeBoer is going to do? How's his tenure going to be at Alabama? And I said, I think his tenure will be defined by the level of freak out and how he responds to the first time everybody freaks out at Alabama. And we're seeing that right now. And I actually think they're probably going to roll Missouri. I don't think Missouri's that good, to be honest with you. I know Brady Cook came back, and we're going to get into that, later in the week. But as I said before the season, all that stuff that he did before, when I would have Alabama fans say, oh, well, look what he did at Washington, and we know he's going to be elite because of this. None of what you did at Washington matters to any Alabama fan that has been around lately. None of that matters. That did nothing for you if you're an Alabama fan. If I'm an Alabama fan, him doing well at Washington, beating Oregon, that's great. You've lost to Vanderbilt and now Tennessee. You're 0-2 in the state of Tennessee, right? In your first year here at Alabama, you're sitting at 4-2? Alabama's 4-2 right now, 5-2, whatever it is. So all the stuff in the past at Sioux Falls, at Washington, at Medina High School, wherever, none of that matters anymore. It is about what have you done for the Alabama fans. And thank goodness, David, thank goodness Ryan Williams made that play late in that Georgia game. Yeah. Or it would be, you live in the house, you live with an Alabama legacy. Oh, I live with a girl that's from Tuscaloosa. I know how they are, and watching them this year, it's, we talk about it in politics. What are the polls saying? What are the polls saying? Well, buddy, the polls just came back, and they don't like you very much right now.
Yeah, so 5-2 right now on the year, and that's the most perplexing part is that first half against Georgia, they look like a perfect football team on both sides of the ball, not just one. Yeah. On both sides of the football, they look like a team that I think you could have penciled in for the national championship. And ever since then, man, things have been pretty ugly, particularly in the second half of games. You look at the second half of that game, right? Yeah. Georgia storms back. The second half of South Carolina, you almost give that thing away late, and there's an onside kick that you're not able to recover. You talked about you played a Tennessee team that was shut out in the first half of the 2 previous games. You shut them out in the first half. Yeah. It was 3 games in a row. Second half, Tennessee storms back. Like, that's what's a little bit concerning.
And that's the opposite of what we saw with Nick Saban and his staff. We talk about what are the best coaches are the ones that can adjust. You've got to be a chiropractor. It's all about adjustments in game. And Alabama has kind of regressed there. Not that they can't fix it. They still got really good personnel. And I want to make this point before we get to the chat. I know we got to get to other stuff as well. Does it seem to anybody else, and I was talking about this on the radio this morning, that Jalen Milroe, it's almost like he's made the conscious decision, maybe we're not that great defensively or as a team. Now I've got to go play hero ball, and every snap I've got to make a heroic play, as opposed to when you go back and you watch the Georgia tape, not only the Georgia tape, but the Wisconsin tape. He's just taking what they're giving him. If you're going to give me the 5-yard hitch, I'm going to take it. We'll never go broke making a profit. Even if I got to check it down or if I got to take off and get 3 yards and we got to live in 2nd and 7, that's fine. And you mix that in with the quarterback design runs, the power read. But where it comes into handy is when you're not able to run the ball super successfully, including being Jalen Milroe. will you still be mature enough to say, you know what, we'll matriculate the ball down the field. I don't have to go just say, you know what, I'm going to throw it to Ryan Williams on this play regardless, or I'm going to take a shot regardless. David, I feel like from the quarterback position, he's playing a little bit of hero ball, and it's not all on him. He's one of the main reasons they're staying in these games. But whenever you're facing mixed coverages or zone coverages, you can't go out there with that mindset. It's like swinging at every pitch. When you get in the batter's box, you may square up a couple and hit a couple home runs, but you're going to strike out a lot.
I honestly just feel like the quality of opponent you're playing has increased and been better. I mean, I know that feels weird to say when we just watched a Georgia team shut out Texas in the first half, and that was the best Alabama looked was against that same Georgia defense. That's why college football is so weird right now, but this Tennessee defense is elite. Right? I mean, even the South Carolina defense, when you played them, great players. You've been talking about their defensive front seven all season long. I just feel like the quality of defense has improved. What do you think?
No, I would agree, especially these last couple of weeks. But at no point should you be throwing it 45 times in a football game.
Yeah.
That's just not who you are. And I know situation dictates circumstances.
RPOs sometimes.
Yeah, but I didn't feel like they did a lot of RPOs in that Tennessee game. Like it's your job as a play caller to put him in the best situations. And sometimes when the run's not working out, that doesn't mean you just go away from it for the entire game. You have to have some sort of balance. And Jalen Milroe is at his best when his run game is like design quarterback runs are getting called for him, and there just haven't been enough of that the last couple weeks.
Not to interrupt you, I just wanted to ask one point before I forgot, because we didn't get to this in the recap. Just from a coaching perspective, because both you guys coached, Alabama has the football with a minute, I think 55 left at the end of that game. It was 4th and 22. You're in minus territory. Would you have punted that football with the 3 timeouts, even though you're under the 2-minute warning? Would you have punted that football or gone for it on the 4th and 20 plus? Remember, they ended up running the tailback screen. It wasn't technically a screen because Ryan Williams didn't block, but either way, didn't even push the football down the field. Ended up Tennessee kicked a field goal to go up 7. What were you guys thinking on that one?
I'd have to remember the exact yard mark they were on, but I would go for it because I have Jalen Milroe at quarterback, and he can make explosive plays.
What were you thinking on that one?
Well, to me, I think you have to go for it just looking at the score and what you're down because, you know, at that point, you know, if you're down 3 points, it's a little bit of a different story. I felt like just with the time remaining, with the way the momentum was going, you had to go for it. Maybe you get a pass interference call or something like that. I thought that was the right choice. As far as what Blaine was saying from a play calling standpoint, I agree 100%. Jalen Milroe does not need to live in a world where you're not that he can't throw, but a lot of quarterbacks don't. Most quarterbacks don't. Outside of the air raid offense that Mike Leach coached, you know, if you're we talked about this with Georgia. Why are you throwing the ball 40 times a game when at the end of the day, not that you say, all right, I'm just going to run my head into a brick wall, but also Alabama has an advantage that most teams don't have at quarterback. They have Jalen Milroe, who's one of the best running backs on the field at quarterback at all times. So you can get that extra blocker out there as opposed to Carson Beck. You really don't want him to be running a lot of power read or Q power at the end of the day.
And I feel like we've had this conversation before.
We did last year. You remember what game it was? The Alabama lost to Texas at home.
Texas. We've had this conversation before. So and I know Nick Sheridan knows what he's doing, and he doesn't want him out here throwing 45 times. But I think Jalen does have to make the conscious decision on the RPOs or whatever it is. I don't need to prove anything to anybody. Just make the right decision.
Well, and kudos to Tennessee for putting them in that position. Being able to stop the run at that rate to where now they have to kind of dribble with their left a little bit or go against what they typically want to do in early downs that throw them off schedule. So we got to make sure and give Tennessee our flowers. It's just an interesting time in Alabama right now because the guy that always fixed it when it rarely did break is not there anymore. Now you got a new mechanic in town and you haven't seen him operate on or work on the car yet, which is going to be interesting. Hey, appreciate you guys stopping by. As usual, hit that subscribe button if you don't mind. If you do mind, why are you wasting your time?